Hi, I'm Megan.
And I'm Melita, and we are twins that got into Stanford this past application cycle.
Today, we will be reading the essays that got us in and providing general tips that you should keep in mind while writing your essays. Tip number 1 is the angle is more important than the topic. A lot of people worry about their essay ideas being overdone or overwritten, and that's a valid concern. There are so many college applicants and only a limited amount of ideas. But the key is that you can write about almost anything, even mundane experiences. The key is how you present it. First, you should commit to a topic. Then, go through ways that you can present this in unique ways. Your first idea is likely everyone's first idea, so don't just stick with the obvious way to write about something. Think outside of the box and think what different aspects people might not touch on when it comes to that topic. These unique angles can really help you stand out in terms of creativity with the admissions officers. So I'm going to be reading 2 of my short essays from Stanford that I think really stood out, and these were some of my favorite essays just because of their unique angle. The first prompt is, what is the most significant challenge that society faces today? And this needs to be answered within 50 words. A lot of people write about climate change, world hunger, peace and wars, and major current event issues. However, they just write it as they come up with it in their head. They don't spend the time to tailor it into something unique. So in my response, I acknowledge some of these problems, but also talk more about what I think is the root of the problem. Breaking news. Vexbolts loses millions of TikTok followers. Why are we, and by extension the news, fixated on brain rot debates about frog or deer faces while Arctic caps melt at record speeds and millions starve? Our generation is chronically online. We need to transform the media into catalysts for solving real-world problems. So at the time, these topics were very niche and relevant on TikTok and social media platforms. And I think it's important to keep things up to date because our world is constantly changing and that might influence how you write about certain problems. So you should talk about what you think is most relevant, keep up-to-date details, and then tie it into what you think might create a larger problem in society. And the next short answer prompt is, what historical moment or event do you wish you could have witnessed? And this is also 50 words. So this one is going to have a lot wider of a range of responses because people have all sorts of reasons to include a historical event, but some overdone ones might be the moon landing or the creation of the atomic bomb, just various really important historical events, but usually there's not a lot of reasoning behind it and there's no curiosity or unique approach. So in my case, I spent a long time going through all of my kind of stereotypical ideas that I couldn't think of a unique approach until I finally got something that sounded really interesting, not just to me, but even from an outside perspective. And I thought, how can I write that in the most fun way possible so that when you read it, you really do think that would be a cool idea. Stephen Hawking's 2009 time traveler party. I would travel to the precise coordinates of time and space printed on the invitations to see the Welcome Time Travelers banner and untouched champagne glasses. His daring experiment, sending the invitations after the event, inspires me to challenge reality and embrace the unconventional. So there are a few things I'd like to point out about this short essay. Notice how even in just 50 words, I was able to touch on a lot of different things. So one of them is imagery, like how the party actually looked, in terms of the banner and the glasses that no one ever showed up to. Another is making sure I explain this new topic fully. If I just answered without really explaining what the party was, maybe it would make sense to me, but it wouldn't make sense to this admissions officer who's reading an entirely new essay. So even if I'm at the risk of over-explaining it, I did want to just flat out explain what it was before I talked about why it was interesting to me. And then finally, that last sentence explains why it relates to me and why I chose that as my answer.
Our second tip is that you need a hook. While you don't need a hook for every single essay, having a hook in your intro of an essay can really help you stand out. Some people think that starting with a hook or dialogue can be a little gimmicky or almost try hard, and while writing my essays, I did have people tell me that, but personally, I think it's better to take the risk and just go with the hook anyways, because otherwise your essay could come across as a little bland or boring. Definitely don't try to force a hook that doesn't fit, but if you feel strongly about your hook, don't let other people tell you not to include it.
Because without a hook, your essay might just be forgotten, and that's probably the worst thing that could happen.
Okay, so I'm going to be reading the introduction of one of Stanford's most important essays, which kind of talks about intellectual curiosity. So the prompt is, the Stanford community is deeply curious and driven to learn in and out of the classroom. Reflect on an idea or experience that makes you genuinely excited about learning. 250 words or fewer. So for this essay, I talk about how I struggle to speak Spanish because I'm unable to roll my R's. So I've been studying Spanish for the past 10 years, and I'm pretty advanced in terms of reading and writing, but speaking is a part of Spanish language that I really struggle with because I can't roll my R's. So in this essay, I take an interdisciplinary approach and I talk about trying to learn my R's through learning the physics behind it. But I'm just going to be reading the intro to show how I used to hook. Okay, also, I'd like to apologize beforehand for butchering the pronunciation in this essay because I genuinely cannot roll my R's. 1. Position tongue behind upper teeth. 2. Blow steady air. 3. Practice tur. Ferrocarril. I attempted, the words stumbling off my tongue. Despite a decade of Spanish classes, my R's remained frustratingly flat and refused to roll. Even after hours of dissecting YouTube tutorials, I couldn't achieve that elusive trill. I broke down the sound into its mechanics: tongue position, airflow, and movements. But what made the R vibrate? So even though the main point of this essay was not about rolling my R's, it was about learning the physics principles and experimenting, this hook was a relatable anecdote that was a way to ease into the bulk of the essay, which was about the more academic, physical side of things. Specifically, I started with numbers, which were the steps I used to try and learn how to roll my R's. So that's the 1, 2, and 3. I talked about watching so many YouTube videos and still struggling to pronounce my R's. I talked about also dissecting my problem down into its core parts, which shows my problem solving skills. So this short introduction has actually so much information about how I learn and how I approach problems, even though at first glance it just looks like I'm telling a funny story.
Tip number 3, your essay should show different parts of yourself. This is pretty self-explanatory, but you are more than your extracurriculars, awards, and hobbies. You're a three-dimensional person, which means that you have different values and traits that are specific to you that you might not think are very important, but they still make you who you are. So make sure to include these in small ways in your essays. So Stanford doesn't have a Y major essay, and this is because they don't admit you for a major. They admit you into the school as a whole. This is because they look for the type of person that belongs at Stanford, that has that motivation or certain traits. This is why you should show what really matters to you, because that shows why you should be a person at Stanford, not necessarily what you have to do to try to get into a certain major. So in these next couple of essays, we took a very breadth over depth approach. So we talked about a wide variety of aspects of our identity or personality. So this first prompt is, how did you spend your last 2 summers? And the word limit is 50 words. So I said, presented Stencer at National Invention Convention, photographed Veil Nebula while debating existentialism, sampled ice cream flavors at Ashley's between Yale P sets, duetted Colors of the Wind for YSPA talent show, tripped over my 2 left feet while contra dancing, worked at Mathnasium tutoring neurodivergent kids. So in each of these responses, I talk about STEM and I talk about one of my intended majors like math or astrophysics. But also in each line, I talk about another part of myself. So for example, I talked about photographing the Veil Nebula while debating existentialism. Personally, I really like having philosophical conversations with friends late at night, and I think that shows a more interdisciplinary part of myself. So even while pursuing STEM research, I'm going to be talking about philosophy. Or I also talked about how while working on problem sets, we might stop for ice cream. Or also how at my astrophysics summer program talent show, I sang a duet. So I talk about all of my academics while also showing the kind of person I am, the kind of friend I would be on campus. And then for the same prompt, how did you spend your last 2 summers within 50 words? During UF SSTP, I researched cutavirus at the McKenna lab by day, trapped roaches for my roommates at night, kayaked away from alligators at the recreational center, and built digital clocks in Minecraft. The previous summer, I forged global connections at ISIF, worked at Mathnasium, and competed at Mount Nationals. So this doesn't show directly what matters to me as much. I'll talk more about that in the next essay, but this is again a more breadth approach where I talk about the many different things I do, and I tried incorporating a little bit of personality with the whole research by day, but like, the personality of like roaches at night and then kayaking away from alligators. Keep things a little more fun rather than towards the end of the essay is more literal. So then this next essay, I think, shows more of that like inner personality and what matters to me. And that's because the prompt is list 5 things that are important to you within 50 words. So you can also sprinkle some academic stuff in if you're really passionate and it's like on topic for you, but really this should be your chance to show who you are as a person. Celebrating Konkan roots by cooking pork buffet in Italy for family dinners. Embracing identity by choosing curl cream over straightening iron. Spontaneous road trip with friends, belting Olivia Rodrigo with windows down. Science research, growth through discovery. And star ability shenanigans, Macarenaing with Doggo, dance moms with Alexis, and painting with Felipe. So I talked about all sorts of things in this essay that are seemingly random, but also make up important moments of my life. And I think that's equally important as trying to fit this mold and be on topic, because there are so many different interesting facts about me, and I kind of wanted to just show a few of those. And this brings us to the next tip: show, don't tell. The biggest mistake people make is flat out saying their passions. I like this, I learn about this, I am passionate about that. If you have to tell the admissions officer that you're interested about it, you are not being genuine enough. You should be able to show through the way that you speak about these topics that you genuinely care for them and you're interested in what's next. For example, if you're into biology, you shouldn't just talk about how you like CRISPR. You should talk about how you're concerned about the future of it and the ethical implications. Or if you're interested in literature, don't just talk about a book you read. Maybe tie it into how it changed a specific experience of yours when you thought back to it. Sprinkle in details of what you're interested in with how it ties in with your life, and be specific. Admissions officers see these little details as signs of you thinking deeply and not just trying to skim the surface of a shallow understanding of your interested topic. So I made sure to include a lot of details in this short essay. Briefly elaborate on one of your extracurricular activities, a job you hold, or responsibilities you have for your family within 50 words. So I wrote about how I presented at Spanish Conferencia, a poetry presentation, and instead of just saying what I did, I showed it through specific examples. For 4 years, I've performed Julia de Burgos and Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz at the Florida State Spanish Conference. Their palabras ignite mi alma, fueling my voice to challenge injusticias and fight for la igualdad de género. I carry the legacy of fierce women defying the status quo. So I tied in the importance of the poems I was presenting because they all had this theme of why I chose them in terms of women empowerment. And I kind of dove into that and had a little fun approach of tying the Spanish words in with the English ones. And although that is a bit of a risk in terms of comprehension, I only did just enough so that you would hopefully still understand it, but also show kind of how I feel in terms of bridging the English and Spanish versions of the understanding.
Okay, so then for the same prompt, I chose to talk about robotics, but specifically through the angle of empowerment. A lot of people write about just how they do robotics, build a robot, write code. But for me, robotics is so much more about empowerment and also working with a team. So I wanted to show the admissions officer what robotics means to me. I'm the ultimate hype woman, the green M&M. At robotics competitions, my team of 4 dresses as colorful M&Ms, handing out candy to promote sportsmanship and break the ice with competitors. By embracing fun, I hope to make STEM vibrant, diverse, and welcoming to everyone, just like a bag of M&Ms. Notice how the prompt says, briefly elaborate on one of your extracurriculars. Elaborate means more than just talk about what you did. Elaborate means show something that they don't already know about your extracurricular. So specifically for me, I talk about empowerment in robotics and sportsmanship. So from my activities, the admissions officer already knows that I do robotics. What they might not know is that I dress up as a colorful M&M, handing out candy, and how I bring positivity to these competitions that can otherwise be very competitive.
The last overall tip is look at the people who already made it where you want to be. If you want to get into Stanford, look at the current Stanford population and see the sort of traits that they have and what these people are doing. You shouldn't try to mimic everything they do, but instead look at the sort of outlook, attitude they have towards different things and see if you correlate with that, and if so, write about that in your own way.
Don't copy their activities, take the exact classes that they did, but a lot of Stanford students have social media platforms where they talk more about their mindset and their approach to things, and you can learn so much from them about just how they approach life. So our tip isn't to copy their exact applications, do all of their extracurriculars, apply for all of the scholarships they applied for. Don't do that. But you can learn so much from other people who've already went through the application process.
And as a reward for making it to the end of the video, we just want to give you a little bonus tip,
which is create a brand new email at the start of the application cycle when you're on Common App.
So this could be in the format of like your name, college, and some order like that. And this email should be set aside for just Common App or college related items.
This is going to help you stay more organized, especially because if you use an email you already have, you are very likely to miss important emails, especially because most of the emails you get from colleges could go into spam or junk.
So once you have this separate email, you can look specifically for if you have any interviews that have reached out to you, or if you have any updates or missing documents on your portal, which is very important. These could blend in with your other emails if you just use one email for personal and college purposes.
This is especially important for interviews because oftentimes when an interviewer is contacting you, they want to have the interview within that next week. And if you miss that email, you will not be able to interview at all. And that could really hurt your chances of not getting in.
Also, a little reminder that these emails usually come from their personal or school email, not from the school itself. So if you're expecting to see an interview from Yale University or Harvard University, that's not going to be the case. You're going to get it from the name of your interviewer. And that's kind of hard to look out for, which might look like spam in your personal email.
Also, make sure to check your email every single day, because oftentimes you might think, oh, you only need to check when there's going to be an application status update, but you never know what kind of email you could get. They could be missing an important file from you, whether that's a transcript, letter of recommendation, and sometimes they might email your college counselor, but also we've had colleges email specifically us if they have a question about a letter of rec, or if something didn't upload properly, they might specifically email the student. So make sure you are checking that email every single day, because the last thing you want to do is miss an important email, miss a deadline, and then not get into that college. Thank you for watching our videos, and also thank you guys so much for 1,000 subscribers. That was a milestone I was really excited to hit, and I'm so excited to see this channel keep growing, especially once we start vlogging at Stanford.
We couldn't do this without you, and we hope that you stay tuned and continue supporting us.